The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
It is time for Mission Minded. Keep your mind, your mission on your mind in a lot of ways. I just start the show and I don't tell Michael Coleman what we're talking about. So I will preface this by saying that, but you and I just had a pretty nice conversation about our world affairs and what's going on with our administration, and it appears that no one's untouchable. Can you share what you just shared with me briefly, what's going on and how you're going to combat that? Can you do that for me?
Yeah. So I think I announced on Bite by Bite last week that we had gotten some LFPA cuts.
LFPA, explain what that is.
Yeah, the LFPA is the local food purchasing agreement, and basically every state who participates, and not all states participate in it. Alabama was one of the first, but USDA money is given to primarily disadvantaged farmers. It goes about 70% of the farmers it supports in Alabama are labeled as disadvantaged farmers, usually of a minority background or have some sort of barrier.
Okay.
And the idea was you're going to pay farmers market price for their product, and then they're going to grow it, and then they're going to deliver that product directly to food banks.
Okay.
So it comes directly from the farm to the food bank. When that happens, it gives us lots of time to be able to process that through our inventory, as opposed to a donation from Walmart or something. Yeah.
Is that a good deal for these farmers? I mean,
because it's a guaranteed. You grow the product.
Are there farmers that want this deal? I mean,
absolutely. There's 87. There's 87 farmers in Alabama alone that participate in this program.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So it's been cut out, and it's meant about $11 million to the state of Alabama. But again, I get it. Things have to be cut. LFPA was kind of added back to help farmers back during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
We're not in the pandemic anymore, so I get the argument. It doesn't mean that you don't get used to what's happening, and so you feel like, oh, you're always going to have this program, and then it's gone, and so you've now got a hole that you got to fill.
And so, what was the LFPA? What was it before COVID? What was the agreement before, or was there any?
No, there was no, process that they would buy direct. That didn't mean that the USDA did not support farmers.
Yeah.
But it just looked differently, and there was no direct link between farmers to food bank that was supplemented by USDA funds.
Gotcha.
So, and there's all sorts of great business lessons. And I know this is primarily a business show that we talk about, but there's really so many great business lessons in this, which is, I don't know. I haven't talked a lot about your typical SWOT analysis and anywhere but I won't go too far down this rabbit trail. But a SWOT analysis is you basically just draw a quadrant and an SW, and S stands for you identify your strengths. W, you identify your weaknesses. O is you identify opportunities. And then T is representing threats. And so it's a way to think strategically.
I like that.
In what you're doing. So you're sitting down and going, okay, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses. Here's some opportunities that we're not, based on current circumstances, based on the fact we have strengths. Oh, here's some areas that we're not, and then you've got some threats, like what are some things? And so always you need, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So, and the LFPA is not big enough to do that, but the question comes in as we are being cut government funding, and they've done some more cuts, and we just got a notice yesterday that 23 transfer trucks that were scheduled to come to us in the next few months have been canceled now, and it's about 1 million pounds of food. Wow. We don't really know what the circumstances are. It's probably related to these cuts. I don't think that Elon Musk and his crew did the cuts. They aren't really getting into that level of the weeds. I think the USDA uh, Secretary Brooks Rollins has made that decision. But she also just said we're going to give farmers $10 billion and support farmers, and that's I'm I think from Trump's perspective, right or wrong, I think this point is right. How you go about it could be debated, but we want to be able to grow enough food and produce enough food ourselves
Mm-hmm.
to be able to take care of our nation. Because if we didn't and we got in wartime and people could withhold food, just like we saw back in the 70s with OPEC when they withheld oil and we had not discovered a lot of the oil and resources we have. So we were at their mercy.
Yeah.
And it threw us into high inflation, that whole stagflation thing. It was a mess. I just remember how much stress my father and his business went through. So I said all that to say that when things like this happen, you can, wring your hands about it, but there's absolutely nothing I can do that's going to affect the USDA. You can lobby, you could lobby your congressman, you can fight for those kind of things. But the reality is, as a leader of an organization, you have to be able to adjust to what the current climate. You're going to have trends that shift. You're going to have um, uh, resources that are there 1 minute, and the next minute those orders are going to dry up. Whatever it is, and whatever business you're in, you could have some sort of tragedy, and now all of a sudden, oil is, at a refinery, and now oil doubles or so. You just never know. So you have to be able to, when you're doing a SWOT analysis and things like that, you have to say, okay, here's the potential threats. Well, what happens if our food supply is disrupted? Well, that's exactly what's happened.
Mm-hmm.
Our food supply gets disrupted. And so now, when you go through that, what do you do as a business? You can't just sit back and cry and whine about whatever that circumstances is, because people are still depending on you to navigate your way through it.
Yeah. You just
And
have to
so
be, yeah, you have to be,
yes,
well, I mean, I know you're already incredibly efficient, so you just have to be more efficient. I mean,
well, you just have to look and say, okay, if we have less food to distribute, what does that look like?
yeah,
Is there any way, do we have resources to go buy the food to make up the difference? Well, we can't go buy all the food that we need. So now what does that look like? If people are going to be getting less food, how do you do that equitably? And how do you go ahead and inform agencies? You don't want to create panic. You don't want, the sky's not falling, but you want to deal with the reality. So there's just so many elements that go into that. Plus, you don't want to, with my own organization, I don't want them to go home stressed,
yeah,
and carrying this home, because again, you just that whole self-care thing, you can't be taking on burdens that you can't do anything about.
yeah.
Yes, it's a problem, but we're going to navigate our way through it. We're going to adjust, and we're going to do the best we can, to be able to handle this threat, and even look at, okay, with this threat, are there new opportunities that may come about that didn't previously exist? Lots of times we get so dependent on the government giving food, giving whatever it is, or dependent on one thing. And so we sit back and rest on our laurels rather than say, okay, what happens when the gravy train
And so, yeah,
derails? You know, what am I going to do? How am I going to be able to make it? And so everybody, whether you have a small business, whether you're working or not, leading a nonprofit, everybody needs to go through this to be able to sharpen and hone and not take anything for granted, but always be ready to adjust to the potential threats that exist.
and what does that SWOT acronym stand for again?
Yeah, so SWOT is your strengths, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Weaknesses and opportunities.
And
Gotcha.
when you look at that for your business, and I encourage people to do that. Yeah, you can do it by yourself, but it's always good to get, 4 or 5 people in a room and just start slinging stuff out there. Hey, just anything that could happen, and you can even have degrees of threat. Something's like the government is not going to go away completely.
Yeah.
So you've got degrees of how big of a threat that food supply drying up. Is it going to dry up 1 million pounds, or is it going to end up drying up 10 million pounds?
Yeah.
So there's degrees, and how do you respond and all of
Before
that.
before we get into some spring cleaning here, and I can see this next question going probably the entire show, so we'll just play it by ear. But email from Michael down in Montgomery wants to know what happens in 3.5 years when the Democrats take over the White House again. It's a great question. There's a lot of things changing. There's a lot of things moving. A lot of presidents don't like 4-year terms because you can't possibly get what you really want to get done in 4 years. That's why if you have an 8-year situation, 4 years is a quick time because you have to go through Senate, got to go through House, you got to go through all these, and it just takes time to get all these big things moved. Although it appears that Donald Trump is getting things moved pretty quickly. What would happen if the Democrats take over the White House in the next election? What do you think would happen? Do we go all the way back to where we just came from? Because a lot's changed.
Yeah. So typically, what you see in Republican versus Democrat administrations. Democrat administrations are more um, larger government. Again, for better or for worse, I'm not making that determination. I'm just
Mhm.
saying they typically tend to lean more on the government side, more regulation, more control, less free markets, less uh, climates favorable to businesses. That's why you have so many people. When they do the census in 2030, it's predicted that California is going to lose 4 seats. All the seats that are being lost, and this is now, of course, we're still 5 years away from that,
Sure.
but as of right now, only blue states are going to lose seats because population shifting, and they're going to shift to red states, or they have shifted to red states. The population have, and so that'll play out once the census is done. And so that's very telling, just in terms of like if you're going to start a business or if you want to work climate or things like that, you're going to go to where you typically have more business friendly communities and environments and get government support and all that kind of stuff. So, but there's some things that just as easily as Trump undid with Biden, um, he's kind of set this paradigm now. I'm going to come in on day one and I'm going to sign 50, executive orders. Well, whoever comes in behind him, if he wants to, can undo every one of those. Now,
Mhm.
there are things that I think, like right now, uh, it's kind of talked about that Democrats right now, as a party, feel a little lost. Now, that happens when you take major thumpings, and which they did in this last election. And so they're trying to gain their footing. Right now, the only footing that they have is if Trump makes a mistake, like with the signal, with the release of the classified information. And now everybody, and they're riding that, and maybe rightly so. Um, I think there's plenty of criticism to go around about that. But what they're not proposing right now, anywhere on congressional level or otherwise, is what's our plan for the economy? What's our plan for the citizenry? What's our plan for the American dream for people to do all that? They have they have not had anything out there. Their whole campaign was keep Trump out of office, keep Trump out of office.
Mhm.
So between then and now, it could very well happen that things could turn around. I remember George Bush, the first one, had an approval rating during the Gulf War of 90% one time, and then he ends up losing to Clinton.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything can happen. But but I think the Democrats are going to have to come up with a plan, and then I think they're going to have to come in and say if this is our plan, and then executive orders and all that. It can't just be coming in to undo Trump. It has to be executive orders that point directly to how they're going to intend to accomplish that plan.
All I know,
And
all I know is it's going to be a long 4 years for Democrats. It's just,
well,
yeah,
one of the things I would encourage, and like I said, I'm open. I really do try to look at both sides, but right now, Democrats are. Even Bill Maher said this, and he's a traditional liberal.
mhm.
And I listen to him all the time. And he said right now, Democrats are choosing the wrong side of every 80-20 or 90-10 issue out there. Right now, you're killing Trump for taking these gang members to these terrible prisons
Mhm.
in El Salvador. So it looks like you're defending, keep the gang members here,
Yep.
the ones that,
Even if it means throwing away some innocent people
yeah,
with it, sure, yeah,
yeah, and you're like a sanctuary city. I mean, I was just reading this morning, sanctuary cities where ICE and maybe the Border Patrol were getting a gang of 8, trying to get them out of a van and requested help. And the local police showed up, and they didn't ask their immigration status. They just helped secure them in handcuffs, and then they left. Well, the mayor and the chief of police threw those officers under the bus, saying we're a sanctuary city. We don't help immigration
yeah.
officers. We don't do those kind of things. That may play well in, I think, Rochester, where that happened. In some Democrat controlled urban environments, it does not play well across the country. And unless that dynamic changes and the Democrats come up with a plan, it's hard for me to be able to see how they're going to take back over, at least in 4 years. So I'm not predicting they won't or that they can't. They certainly can, but they've got to come up with something pro America, and lay out their vision and future for the
I'll say this too,
country.
and this is not a political show, but it's almost hard to talk about business, not talk about politics. If I were thinking about bringing my family here, or I was thinking about coming here as a terrorist, or I was thinking about coming here, period, for anything, I'd think twice now. And I think that's one of the reasons that we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater is and even those commercials, think twice about coming to the United States. If you want to come here, we'd love to have you, but you're going to do it right. And if you don't do it right, you're never going to be here. So I mean, yeah.
Well, we were having 4,000 immigrants a day.
Yeah, now it's like 200 or something. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, so the bottom line is, and when you go back and you look at they had this bipartisan legislation that
mhm.
Trump behind the scenes, I think, kind of helped. And Democrats and even Joe Biden said, well, what can I do? He just kept saying, what can I do? What can I do? And they looked like they clearly didn't want to do anything. And Trump came in and said, you can do something, and I'm fixing to show you what you can do. So now he that was what he ran on. Now there's still a little trickle, but they've shut that down,
Yeah.
and for the most part. And so people, even if you're not a Trump fan, people go, I sleep better at night knowing that guy's in charge. Because even though I may not personally like him, or there's things that he does that are abrasive, or I think he's a bull in a china shop, however you want to describe him, the bottom line is he said, we need to do it. People elected him, and he's doing it.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
you could quibble about the process or how far he's gone, and he's certainly that's certainly justifiable. But you can't argue that what he's doing. He didn't do a bait and switch. He didn't
No.
say this is what I want to do and come in and do something else.
No, and as a Christian and as a voting Republican for years, and I've voted Democrat as well. I would just hope and pray every night that we can sprinkle a little compassion and a little ethnicity, if you will, not ethnicity, but ethics,
Yeah.
over top him, just to remember, that we
Sure.
take care of each other as human beings. Period. We're
Sure.
all in the same boat. Mission minded, keep in mind your mission your mind. Joe in Birmingham said he listened to the show last week about starting businesses. Absolutely loved it. Said he was in the process of starting a business in Birmingham. Learned a lot, which is great. We're very, very happy that you learned something from our show. That's wonderful. Also, got an interesting email, and I'm not going to read it just because I'm gonna take an idea from it. I don't want to get into the answer for this particular question, but with Doge and with everything's going on in our government, are you seeing businesses, regardless of whether they're pro Trump or not, looking at their businesses and going, it's springtime. Let's do some spring cleaning. We're doing it in the government. It's something that needed to be done for years and years and years. Maybe I have a staff of 130 people. I'm building tires or widgets or whatever. How can we make our bottom line better, and how can we be more efficient as a business? First of all, are you seeing that? Because normally we see that trickle down even from the top. And then I'll get into what can we do to be more efficient and do some spring cleaning in our business, because I think it's really important. I mean, we get through audits, we go through things every year. We sit down with our not only our customer base, but certainly our employees, and we have resume building seminars and things to make us better on a daily basis. And we usually do that at the end of each year. But have you seen some businesses adopting this idea of not doing it to that extent, but saying maybe this would be a good idea for us to sit back and go, hey, listen, we could save money on toilet paper?
Yeah, historically, what happens is when the economy's going good and everything, and we're not in a recession, the economy's going good. I know the stock market with Trump being in has been kind of up and down. When things are going good, then you kind of tend to let people have perks and do some extra things, and maybe you give your employees of a small business a gym membership or little kind of things like that. But this is one of the things I battle in the nonprofit space. As I've talked about many times, there's so much mediocrity in the nonprofit space, and it's because we continue to hire people who are hire leaders who are very passionate, good men, good women. They have the heart, they have the mindset, they're compassionate. They really care deeply about the mission, but they don't have business acumen. And so a nonprofit, forget it's a business first and foremost. You have to do budgets, you have to have revenue coming in, however you get that revenue. You have to be able to make those budgets, but you have to perform your services as if, I tell them all the time, if there were 5 other food banks in Montgomery, I would want them to choose us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right now, the agencies that we serve that go out to these different communities, they don't have a choice. The food bank, there is no competition within the food bank. So it's so easy to go to kind of rest on your laurels and go, yeah, and stop measuring like efficiency and stop measuring. And it is so easy to lose and to see how much money goes out the back door just without even really paying attention. And so every year when we dig in, we have to do this in the nonprofit space. I have to do a budget. As a matter of fact, our fiscal year runs July to June. I'm fixing to turn my budget over. I've prepared a budget for fiscal year 26 starting in July. And it has to go through a process through our finance committee, then to our executive committee, and then to our board and get approved. So what I have to do is do all the analysis. So I've gotten into every I'll just do one example, maybe equipment maintenance. Okay. And I'm looking at, okay, I was budgeted last year. This is what we actually spent. We're up or down. Okay. Now, and then I get into the individual listing of all the expenses. So I may find out, oh, well, it's $10,000 over budget because we had 2 trucks that needed clutches. Well, we've gone to lease, so now we won't have that. So you kind of project that. You have to make an assessment of what you at least expect. One that's easy is, a few years ago, we got $50,000 of interest income in one year from just because coming out of the pandemic, banks and just money market accounts had gone up to 4.5%. And so when we would get government distributions or something, we try to put them, and take advantage of that. So Well, now we lost $20,000. I mean, this year we're going to be maybe half of that. So, I have to look, and now it's a little bit of projection. What do I budget for next year? Well, what are interest rates going to do? You see what I'm saying? So sometimes
Sure.
it's a
Yeah.
bad, but I said all that to say we go line by line and do an analysis to project into the next year to understand first and foremost, what does it cost us to not only run the organization, but to run it at a level of excellence? Because what I don't want to do is ever compromise that standard.
Mhm.
So what we have to do is to say, first of all, how do we run it with excellence? And then once you determine what that looks like, now you say, how do I run that as efficiently as I can without sacrificing excellence? So I want to cut trim any fat until me trimming something causes me to drop the level of performance from excellence down. So that's too far. So in other words, if it takes me, I may have 8 people doing a program, and I go, you know what? I'm convinced we can do this with 6, and it not affect how well we execute this program. Well, then I need to reassign those other 2 people to something that's more productive. But if I go, well, I absolutely can't. If I only have 4, then I'm not going to be able to deliver on time. I'm not going to be able to deliver the same fresh. I'm not going to be able to do all that. So now my program quality has dropped. So I have to determine with each thing, what is that level? I'm trying to hit the sweet spot of maintaining excellence, but knocking it out of the park with efficiency as well. And so you're constantly grinding on that to project to the next year. And the truth of the matter is, with lots of businesses, especially individually owned businesses,
Mhm.
you don't get down to that level as long as you pay until you have a downturn in the economy, you lose some customers, get a bad report, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you turn around, you're like, oh, and then it's like, hey, I've got to lay 8 people off, or I got to lay 12 people, whatever it is, or I've got to cease this operation or this expansion or all the kind of things that go into it because you haven't been planning all along and measuring that as you went.
Info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Info@TonyCurryRadio.net. We love these email questions. Keep them coming. Info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Of course, you can go listen to the show at least 5 days a week on the TKR app. It's been downloaded well over 100,000 times now. We thank everyone who downloaded that. Of course, you can check us out on our podcast platform and certainly right here on our YouTube channel. We get thousands of views every single week, and we love that. And we'll continue to do shows next week. Since we're kind of up against it already, let's next week. Let's talk about if you are wanting to do some spring cleaning in your business, how do you go about doing that? Doesn't mean you.
Sure.
And this could involve expansion. Let's not say spring cleaning. Spring cleaning may be saying, hey, we need to buy a new couch or we need another couch.
Oh, absolutely.
It can mean good things too. So spring cleaning is not always getting rid of things. It could be added things. So let's do that next week. All right, my friend?
Got you.
Thank you, my friend. This is Mission Minded.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.